Hi everyone, this is Shriya.
Hi everyone, this is Sukanya.
And we are back with yet another episode of Intersection Feminism Desi Style Season 3, brought to you by Feminism in India.
Through the course of this podcast, we have been trying to talk about how gender manifests in different areas of work. And when we speak about life in general and work and existence, I think a very, very important component of human existence is expression. And when we talk about expression, we cannot not address the art industry, how art manifests in through different media, and how artists function. And art is also largely a space that is deeply personal, very political, very public, but also very private. And intersectional identities play a huge, huge role in how art is structured, which artists get access to the art space to begin with, what is produced, what is excluded, what is on display, how feasible it is it, etc. So this episode, we are hoping to talk to an artist who has a massive body of work to her credit, and we're trying to figure out what it means to be an artist, especially a woman in the art space in India today. And we're hoping to see how understand a little bit more about how this transpires into work and how this transpires into political conversations, and how generally an artist, also being a woman, how an individual deals with all these multitudes in our current scenario.
Absolutely, Sukanya. We are so happy and so excited to have with us Indu Antony. Indu is a trans-disciplinary artist based in Bangalore. In her pursual of work, she has had to face various social barriers, which she has relentlessly fought and worked to break, and is working with the individuals from the marginalized sections of the society. She is known to explore tonalities of inward discussions, which later on burst out into the communal spaces. Her work comprises of understanding feminist stance, which gives way to performance and installations. We are so happy to have you with us, Indu. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for inviting me. Very excited about this.
So let's just delve into the conversation. And I just want to begin, Indu, by asking you, when you decided to take up art as your career, or pursue a career in art, um, were there people or voices around you that were skeptical, and people who might have tried to talk you out of taking up art as a career choice, maybe because they felt it's too difficult a space for a woman to find a foothold, or maybe because it's essentially not assigned to women, it's not a gender assigned profession to women as such. So did you have these sort of disagreeing voices, and how has your journey been? What prompted you to take up art as a career, and how has it been so far?
To be very honest, skeptical and difficult. I mean, I think it was quite extreme, the reactions. Growing up, I think I've always, kind of had art within me. I would participate in a lot of art competitions, and I really enjoyed, working with the mediums. But it was never considered a career. So it was always engineer or doctor. It never, occurred to me that could be a career. So I wrote my exams, and then I got into medicine. So I finished my medicine, and then I was like, okay, you know what? Now I've done whatever society has asked me to do, and it's time for me to now pursue what I want to do, which is primarily art. So of course there was like, it's, to mildly put it was like, oh, get out of the house, okay, enough, don't not come back anymore. To what is this? What are you going to do with your life? A girl like you should get married, and there were so many of these things that are constantly kept coming up, which gave me like more fodder to work, I think. So it helped to do work more for me. Even people from the industry or from the art world also were like, oh, you're entering at a very later stage, which is I finished my medicine and all of that. So I don't think and medicine is such a, service oriented, beautiful profession. Why would you leave something like that? So yeah, it was not easy, of course. But I think from a young age, I was like mostly like a rebel, I think. So it helped to just keep on.
Indu, like you said, that art was not viewed as a career choice as per se, and
Mm,
what some of the reasons why you also faced a lot of uh, you know uh, backlash was because of that. Do you
mm,
also think even now, in a way, art is seen as something, visual arts, be it visual arts or fine arts, is seen as something like a side passion, like a side thing. You have a job and then you're also following this. Do you think that sort of
yeah.
takes away from the appreciation of the creativity and does not give it like the importance that it actually deserves? What are your thoughts on this?
For sure. Like even now, when I say I do art, they're like, yeah, yeah, but what's your profession? They're like, they'll constantly put art in a hobby section. And every new person I meet, they'll be like, so what are your hobbies? And I'm like, I think that's a stupid question. So let's move on. Let's talk about something else. So this whole thing of like keeping art as categorized as a hobby, that you do something at home, was something very hard to break through also, because I would constantly tell, no, no, this is what I do. Then the question would be like, oh, then how does that work for you? How do you sustain yourself? And all of that. So the multiple questions would follow, but yeah, it is not it's still there. And I think it's much better now, definitely from what it was when I was getting into the profession. At this point, I think a lot more art schools are there around, and I think the more awareness about it for sure.
So, in a lot of your work, Indu, you have also explored the theme of women, as in women at leisure, women in public spaces, how public spaces and the public gaze responds to women, especially bodies and gender, the gender that the bodies embody, etc. So, could you talk to us a little bit about what made you want to explore, what made you decide that this is what I will be exploring, gender is going to be like a huge part of my work, or this is where most of my conversation is going to be. So what made you want to explore the idea, and how do you think the responses to your work have measured up? How has it been for you?
So for me, art is, I can't really take away art from me, and I always react to it from a very personal space. So public art and where we are, it's very important for me to understand where we are situated, what is the spaces around us, what do we come under, who are the people in the spaces. All of this is very important, because you do not exist as a sole body in a society. We exist in among people, and it's very important for me to observe what is happening around me. When it came to the one of the projects, which is safety for women in public spaces, it came from a very personal space where I was attacked on the street, and I was like, why is this happening? And I wanted to understand that in a much more deeper manner as to why this is going on. And then and also the heaviness of like carrying this load of constantly feeling scared, or constantly like looking off your shoulder to see what is happening, who is following, or what is going on, which is a huge load to carry. When you are in a public space, intuitively you take a road which is more lit up rather than a road which has less light. You're constantly, and these things are all happening in a very unconscious manner also. So I was like thinking about like how to kind of uh, begin a conversation. These are things which will take years and years for any kind of change, but at the same time, for me, it's very important to begin some conversation. And that's how the project the project came about, where we were really going and understanding it from ground level, understanding it from ward level as to what is happening, what are the things that we can do. Okay, there's a street light issue. Okay, let's try and get the street lights organized. And then we were also doing this thing called the open bar nights, which is primarily for a woman to drink. You have to go to a fancy place like a pub or club or whatever. But it becomes expensive also. So why is alcohol not really accessible for a lot of women as well? So that was something that we were constantly thinking about. At the same time, these spaces, these small local bars, also become spaces where it is unsafe for a lot of women to cross. So we were thinking, okay, what if we go into these spaces, and will that change? So we kept, doing multiple different interventions as part of the project. So I think the idea of gender came from a very personal space as to how can I exist in the society, and how can I also in some way start a conversation for spaces to become more safe. So that is where Cecilia, the project came about. During the pandemic, what was happening was so we were talking about safety for women in public spaces. So a lot of the violence, what we saw was happening, shifted indoors. So a lot more like domestic violence was happening. That's when I also realized that, a lot of the women in the area that I was working with constantly spoke about not having a safe space, not having a space to move out of home and sit somewhere. You will either have to go to the neighbor's house, but, it's still not as accessible as it is. So I think that during that time, I also felt like it was not just for them, for me also, because I lived by myself. It was not easy for me to be so cooped up in a space. I also wanted another space to kind of go and sit and just, chit chat, whatever. And that's when the idea of Namakate came by. And this is like a public, shutter shop space right behind the Banaswadi railway station. And it is in this Janakiram layout, and a lot of the women were quite happy. We had a grand opening for it, and even now, like we opened it in Jan, and even now it's so beautiful to kind of see a lot of women come there and use it as a leisure space to come just sit and cut vegetables. We also have a swing there because why swings should be only for children, but we also need to kind of have it for ourselves, for adults, and even the idea of like just swinging on these like on the swing kind of calms our mind down. So a lot of the time the women come and say, "Oh, I come here mind clear." Like my mind becomes quite free. So it's quite nice to see how the space also is kind of changing. Even in front of Namakate, there used to be constant brawls, like fights, and so it was a thing that if there was a t-shirt torn in front of Namakate the previous night, there was a huge fight. So a lot of women also found it very hard to kind of come out in that space. But post Namakate, that a lot of things have changed in that area. There's a lady Ambika who comes by, and she starts selling bhaji bonda in the evening. She felt, okay, this is a space which I feel now safe. So can I please bring my cart and sell bhaji bonda here? I said, of course. So it's also beautiful to see how women are slowly taking over that space and making it their own. So yeah, it's hopefully like a 10-year project, and it will keep going on. So that is also another very important thing. And it's part of this whole idea of cultural capital, in the city. What are we remembering spaces by? What are we creating around us so that you remember a city and where you kind of exist also? And how is that making sense to us rather than just being cooped up in your own like bubbles,
Right, Indu. I think two things that you spoke about. One is claiming space, and also, your art. You cannot separate your art from yourself. Like the art and the artist cannot. Like there's this whole debate that we constantly hear about separating the art from the artist, and especially when it comes to allegations of sexual harassment, sexual assault. There is this whole thing. The art of the artist comes to the defense quickly. It's like, oh, but yeah, he's a great artist, or he's a great footballer, things like that. So do you think as a woman in art, as someone who's also working towards sort of helping so many women reclaim their space, reclaim public space, what is your take on the Me Too movement, on sexual harassment in art, and what do you think? Like, do you think it is possible to separate the art and the artist? Do you think that's a viable enough or like option that we should be talking about also?
To be very honest, according to in my personal opinion, I don't think you can separate art and the artist. I think the art that you do is in some way a reflection of the person, who the person is and what they're doing. I honestly do not feel that it can be separate. And at the same time, I am, also I'm someone who constantly believes not in canceling things out, but at the same time having conversations and bringing these conversations up to the forefront. A movement like Me Too is very beautiful, and I think it was very important. It came at a beautiful time. I think it started in 2006, and it caught a lot of fire during a certain time. And it is an important movement, and it is important for a lot of the women who maybe didn't have a voice to come out, but then there was a solidarity, and then there was this whole thing of sharing that suddenly happened. It made a lot of other women to come up and have conversation and say, this happened to me too, and you didn't feel alone, especially in these cases. A lot of the things, you find it very hard to share. Even in Namakate, we had these this idea of storytelling, and then it was about a cloth and you stitch your story in it. So a lot of the women were not sharing initially. It was one or two women who said, okay, they started stitching, saying, yes, my husband is a drunkard and he hit me yesterday. And then it just grew like, caught on like fire, where we saw from 10 stories to today, we have 530 stories that we have collected from these women, where they're really sharing and they feel so comfortable and happy sharing. And that is also part of, I think, that is what happened similarly with the Me Too movement, where people started sharing and you didn't feel alone anymore. And in some way holding people responsible for their actions, So I think that was a very important thing. And I hope because of that, there is a certain kind of link between a lot of people, and it's nice to see that solidarity as well.
Right. Also, when we look at art, like you also mentioned, one thing that really comes into play is the gaze. Whatever form of art we're looking at, installations or paintings or any medium that we look at, there's always the gaze that's in play. And a lot of times women feel very excluded from art pieces. We feel like, oh, maybe I wouldn't look like that if I were to stand that way. I mean, these are things that we feel all the time when we go into museums and galleries and watch performances, etc. So with most of art stemming from the male gaze, what do you feel is the cost that a woman has to pay, even to minimally change the narrative working within this industry?
I mean, to be very honest, a lot has changed, definitely. But at the same time, there needs to be a continuous conversation. I think it is also about encouraging more and more voices to come out, voices to be heard. In the art fraternity, I think there's a lot of like known people constantly know each other all the time. And, so I feel it is every or anybody in some position of power to make sure that all the voices are heard, and to bring in as many like ways of looking at work. There is a certain gatekeeping, and that is very important to be broken, to bring in some amount of change. I think that's where the conversation should go, to be very honest. And it is a lot of these museums I've seen, like, put up paintings of women in a certain way and things like that. And I mean, as you said, it does, you do feel like, do I look like this, and things like that. It's somewhat non-realistic. But the gaze is also sad, in that way, the male gaze and these male artists working in a certain way. I think the only solution is to bring in more and more people into the forefront, and also like break this idea of looking at certain works in a certain way. Like if there's someone who's saying, I'll just not do this very traditional form of painting, but there's other ways of expressing, and I think those things should be encouraged more.
Right. Also, just following up on it, this is something that I wanted to ask you as a spectator and an observer of your work. You have recently archived the smells of Bangalore, and you have spoken to people about what memories these smells evoke in them. You also have these frames where you stitch certain words that are very gendered and very sort of tabooed and used to slut shame women with strands of hair, etc. So there's a very intimate personal element in your work when we look at it, that is using parts of our own body, using smells, using memories and things like that, sort of trying to sort of manifest and create a tangible something tangible out of things that are generally not very tangible, feelings and emotions, and maybe feelings of exclusion and things like that, rage and everything features in it. So I also just want to understand, when you engage with these things, there is also the larger context of the art world, which is very structurally problematic and politically problematic and male and everything. And in it, you're this woman who's trying to deal with intimacy and intimate emotions and being and evolving. Does it get lonely? I always wanted to ask you this. Does it get lonely? How do you find it in you generally as an artist and a woman to keep pushing through this, this work that you do every day?
Even with the hair work, I remember somebody asking me who would buy it. Who would buy your work? It's your hair. And I said, why? What is wrong with it? It's like paint. It's another medium that I'm expressing. So what is wrong with it? But there are, of course, like certain ways in which people perceive art. And I don't think I fall into any structured category that way. I always go with a very strong intuition, something that I really feel and really have to have conversation. And somehow in a very organic manner, the medium comes to me. So like when it came to Vasana, the project that I was archiving the smells, again went back to the whole idea of public and the space around us, which is very important to see in what are the different ways in we were actually experiencing the city, not just that visually and like hearing wise, but also to like close their eyes and smell. Because I think there's too much of looking, to be very honest. I think once in a while people should just close their eyes and just like hear, awaken the other senses, because be it digital media on the phone, on screens, and especially in the pandemic, everybody was so glued to their screens. Everything is happening via screens, which is why, like for me, Vasana is important. For me, why Namakate is important, because I wanted to like actually meet people, actually go away from this idea of digital space. For me, that space kind of scares me, to be very honest. And it is also about like stepping out and seeing the city in a different way. So Vasana became very important project and for me to do. It is I think most of the mediums that I work with are certain non-conventional methods or ways of doing. And I do not feel alone, to be very honest. I feel like on it. I feel the puzzle fits. For me, intuition-wise, okay, I want to say something, and then when the medium comes naturally to me, it feels like it is like the puzzle fitting, and I feel like extreme joy of, oh, great, this is something that I can express myself with. There've been a lot of criticism. People like, oh, what is she doing? All of that, but it's for me. I'm extremely convinced, and I'm extremely like feeling this. There's a certain joy which I can't even explain, And when I feel that while working, I know there's something really good with what I'm doing.
It's very sort of enlightening to hear this, because I feel like constantly as women, in whatever field we are, we're always told, but do you think you can do this on your own? Like there's always that thing, can you sustain there's that thought, no matter what you're doing as a woman, that you will not be able to sustain yourself because just by virtue of the fact that you're a woman. So with respect to that, and like you also mentioned that people saying that who will buy this and everything, do you think what are the challenges you feel in especially in the world of art that you faced when it came to financial sustenance or financial viability? Like what are the challenges that you faced, and what would be a message to younger future generation of artists who want to take this up but are probably also have this inhibition in their mind because the society is constantly telling them? So like both the questions actually, what are the challenges you face and what is your to them?
So sustenance is not easy. I mean, that's something that I get asked on almost every other day, like how do you sustain yourself? How do you run these spaces? Because it's not a easy space at all, because I live by myself. I do not have a partner who supports me or any of that kind of thing. So I um, have to work for myself, have to make sure that I get a meal every day and make sure that, I'm able to, somehow carry on, you know. So yeah, I apply for grants, I apply for open calls in whatever way, and try to exhibit my work. The books, what I made, sold. So there are multiple like small ways in which some money comes, and yeah, in some ways I don't have to look after someone. So in that way, I'm able to. All I need to worry about is like I need to make sure that I eat and I'm able to take care of myself. I think at the end of the day, I'm somehow able to do that. Yeah, I think that's how. But it's not consistent. There's no consistency in this. Tomorrow a grant may be over, and there will be a really bad time, and then you will have to eat 2-minute noodles for like next 1 week or so, because you don't have that kind of money to kind of get some good food. And yeah, so these kind of things happen. It's up and down, but I've been doing it for so many years now, so it's fine. If you really it's for me today, it has become like my oxygen. Today, if I do not, if I can, I'm someone who can never be still. So I'm always doing something or the other, and it is like for me breathing, like making work and doing work or reading about it or any kind of experiential thing which will eventually move towards some work, or even just like reading poems. Um, Everything informs. Like even I love going into the markets, exploring the markets, going out, um, walking through lanes, and all of that like is so important. I do not go to see, okay, how can I get material for my work, but it's just experiences. I think constantly being open to experiences. If someone says, okay, hey, let's go here, go, just go. And I think experiences really help in making work, and also being consistent. I think it's about not giving up. I know it's not an easy journey, but in some way, if you don't give up, I think it will definitely feel nice.
As we come to the close of this conversation, I feel that a lot of times when we speak to artists, especially artists who are men, there's a lot of
Mm-hmm.
mystification around and romanticism around this idea of, oh, this is an artist, oh, they have a certain creative license, or oh, they live in some netherworld, etc. I feel only a woman can really break that through and talk about sustenance and talk about what it means emotionally to invest,
Mm-hmm.
and talk about the importance of walking through streets and sort of being more inward and engaging, also while being vigilant and while embodying all the insecurities and the social sort of dangers of just stepping out there and trying to seek experiences, etc. So this conversation for me has been about a lot about, I'm sure I speak for Shriya also when I say that this conversation for me has pleasantly been about being very realistic, about discipline, consistency, about finding a foothold, about not giving up, about trying every day. And it's been beautiful to have this conversation, and I'm very happy that we could do this. I absolutely loved having this conversation, and we hope that this has been an exciting few minutes of conversation for you as well.
Yeah, definitely. I'm so happy to like share my thoughts, and very great to like talk to both of you.
I completely agree with everything that Sukanya said. This has been really enriching, reflective, and so I'd say heartwarming in the beginning of a hectic work day, work week. So thank you so much, Indu, for
Yeah.
joining us today and for agreeing to do this. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you.
Thank you. That's all for today. We'll be back with yet another episode of Intersectional Feminism Desi Style Season 3 on your favorite streaming platforms next Thursday. Till then, stay tuned and stay safe. Bye.